I'm Chris Morris, founder of the Morrison Model. I'm an educational consultant, but first I'm an advocate for the students of America. Guys, we have got to address what may be the number one concern addressing our public schools, and that is funding. The old adage says, follow the money and you'll realize why everything is the way that it is. It's no different in any sector across America, whether you're talking about religion, education, business. Follow the money has a lot of truth to it. So guys, I want to take a little tour down to the money, how our schools are funded, and maybe try to make some sense as to why things are the way they are. The confusion and the absolutely detrimental practices that we see now that are really at our students' expense really boils down to the money, how we got it, and who's taking advantage and profiting. Guys, even recently, Bill Gates, the man himself, who invested $400 million over the past decade to absolutely shove Common Core down the throats of every single school across America, has even himself admitted that this controversial teaching method is a failure of epic proportions. It significantly is less effective than traditional teaching methods. He's even said so himself. The unfortunate reality, though, is instead of just admitting his mistake, realizing that he doesn't exactly know education and how to implement it as best as other people could, he's doubling down in his efforts at our expense. So guys, I wanted to read a little bit of a recent clip or a recent editorial post from the Washington Post about some of the findings we found with Common Core, its history, and how it's impacted education across our land. So in a recent article by the Washington Post titled, "How Bill Gates Pulled Off the Swift Common Core Revolution," it's clear that the power and influence of Bill and Melinda Gates, their foundation, it bankrolled and built political support across the country for the standards. Within just 2 years, Common Core has swept its way through the states before the plan was even written. I know for a fact in the first couple years of the Obama administration, they came out with this new initiative for public schools called Race to the Top. And we used to have a joke. We called it Race to the Bucks. Because the bottom line was you got millions and millions of dollars for your state if you agreed to implement these initiatives that came out with this whole Race to the Top initiative. But here's the thing. You had to sign on the dotted line that you would implement Common Core. But here's the kicker. People who receive Race to the Top funds, like states who receive millions of dollars for their state, had to agree to implement Common Core, but there's just one problem. Common Core at the time didn't exist. Yes, they were agreeing that they would implement Common Core by taking the money and signing it away, and they didn't even know what it looked like. But then we're supposed to believe the educational leaders later who came up to us and said, oh no, this is the research best practice. This is how we're supposed to reach our kids. This is going to prepare our students for life on and beyond high school and for the 21st century. And I'm supposed to believe that from a bunch of people who are contractually obligated to implement a policy that they hadn't read or seen or known anything about because it didn't exist. There's an old saying that says you can't build a plane and fly it at the same time. Gosh, I wish our government leaders actually took that, into practice because it has a lot of truth to it. So guys, how do we get in this mess and where do we go from here? These are all excellent questions. Well, we've got to start holding people accountable and really digging deep and not just thinking off the top surface level of our minds when it comes to funding. Ask big questions like, wow, how do we just get a $400 million allocation of funds? I'll tell you one thing. Back in the early 2010s, 2010, 2011, there was a disinvestment of educational dollars at both the federal and the state levels, which is a dangerous thing because what that means is people in education and at the state level, they're very, very desperate for funds. That's how they get paid. That's where their salaries come from. That's how they pay for all the initiatives that they want to do in our schools. Well, whenever you have a climate like this where it's disinvested and you don't have money, people get really quick to accept any money that will come available to them or that people would want to give them. So Bill Gates took advantage of these economic environments of the educational landscape. And he came up with Common Core. He said he would give all this money to the states to actually implement this. But guess what? Like anyone who donates large amounts of money, you're not going to just be able to have free reign of how you use those funds without accepting some of the strings attached. With that came his tests, his computer-based assessments to you actually had to sign up for, came his materials. Everything was the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation concept. It was their research, it was their products. They were pretty much bought and paid for. And the entire country is still dealing with the ramifications of this decision. This is a big problem. And it doesn't only extend just to Common Core, which has been admitted by the person who came up with it as a failure. It has to deal with so many other areas that we see in education. For example, I mentioned this in another video, think graduation rates. I know in many school districts, graduation rates for each school are tied to funding. In other words, if you don't maintain a certain percentage of your students that you're graduating year after year, well then you don't get as much money donated to your school or given or allocated to your school if you don't. Well, that's a big problem because that puts pressure on school administrators and leaders to do whatever they got to do to kind of push kids through the system to get through 9th grade and get through 10th grade, whether or not they deserve it. And you wonder why some of these teachers are getting in trouble because they're failing kids. Well, because it's the graduation rates. It's the graduation rates because money is tied to it. So when you threaten people's income, when you threaten people's livelihood, and how you do your processes, you're opening up the door for corruption. So we talk about, and everyone wants to get angry about, hey, oh my, how can you fire this teacher in Florida because she refused to give partial credit for kids who turned in nothing? Well, look at how you're funding the school system. The school administrators know if we don't graduate a certain percentage of kids, we're not going to be able to get funding for our school. So they make a policy that every single student, the lowest they can get for turning in nothing is 50% credit. It makes no sense. It's a disservice to our kids. It gives them a distorted sense of reality, making them think that you can do nothing and get something, which is not true, and it sets them up for failure. But because of how we allocate our funds and how schools are getting paid and the consequences of all those things, we have chaos happening at the high school level. And it's gotta stop. Common Core was trying to build a plane and fly it at the same time, and you wonder why you're having problems. Guys, you take large amounts of money, you got to do what the money tells you to do. It's that simple. We've done that across America around 2008 when the economic crash happened and everyone had no money. School districts were just like everyone else, desperate for it. So they signed on the dotted line, basically signing a contract that hadn't had the words filled in for the contract yet. They're obligated to do whatever somebody decided to write into that contract because they'd already signed on it. It's like a blank check kind of backwards theory. It's not good. So guys, funding is something we got to deal with immediately. Demand answers. Why are we doing some of the things we're doing? Why does huge amounts of money get allocated for certain things that don't deal with the most important thing, our students? We have to reach them. They're the main thing. And if it's not about the main thing, it's about the wrong thing. I heard that once from somebody who I admire a lot and gave me some opportunities in life. And it's still true for anybody else out there who wants to listen. Guys, a funding initiative has to be put in place immediately. We have to relook at how we budget and allocate money for schools, and we have to frankly look at how we get money for schools in the first place. Maybe we just need to get a ton of different people who donate small amounts. I don't know what it is, but guys, we can't continue to do what we've been doing. It's hurting and it's destroying this generation. They have no sense of what reality really looks like and what it takes to be successful, and it's on our hands. Guys, I'm Chris Morris, Morrissey Model. I hope I've given you something to think about. Follow us, look for more. I'll see you next time.